And we're live tonight on Book Chat Live with the amazing Bryan Kramer, who is known for his human communication, which is rare in this world of AI. So how are you this evening, Bryan?
I'm doing wonderful. It's great to see you, my friend.
Yes. So shall we start talking about books? Are you ready to talk about the first book?
It's my favorite thing in the world to talk about books. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Right, here we go. So the first book is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. So why did you choose this book then?
Oh, it's such a great, I mean, it's all in the title, but you know, there's two sides of this book. One is that I recommend both reading it and listening to it on Audible. The Audible, the reason I say that is because there's interviews of the author in between. The reason that I chose the book is because anything is possible when you focus on who and not the how. And it says it right there in the title. They actually go through in the book and actually describe the process for creating a circle of people around you that you can go to for just about anything to get anything done. And that's usually what stops us from moving forward is thinking about, wow, I have to do that. I have to do that. I have to do that. We all have checklists, but what if we were to actually figure out who could do almost everything that we have to do and then think about where we can spend our time a little bit more wisely. And so they make it much more actionable in the book and talk about where you can find those people and what to do about that, the structure that you set up, the process, the systems, all that. But that's why I chose this book.
Okay. And do you feel that you learned something by reading this book? It was kind of like, what was the biggest learning point? What was that? What you would say training point? What did you learn most from reading this book?
That every single thing is outsourceable.
Okay.
Every single thing is outsourceable. There's nothing that we are all replaceable. Every single one of us can be replaced, and so replace yourself. Figure out where you can replace yourself, and that's the number one takeaway.
Okay, well, I'm not going to replace you just yet. I'm going to get on to the next book, then maybe we'll think about replacing you. All right. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah, what a great book. Have you seen or read this, Tim?
I think I have read it, though I can't remember too much about it. I'm surprised though. This is the first ever book by Ryan Holiday that's appeared on this show. So,
oh, really?
In itself,
wonderful.
Yeah. So why this book then? Why The Obstacle is the Way, and why not one of his other books? Because he's got quite a few.
This is something that I already subscribe to, but when you go through the book, it describes in this situation the how to move through obstacles that are in your way. Yeah. And oftentimes we see the Kilimanjaro, the massive mountain that's sitting in front of us, and that becomes a really big undertaking for each of us. And so the first thing is that he describes and does a good job of it in how to let go of the things you can't control, which is just about everything. But how do you let go of that? And then number two is how do you then approach the mountain, the Kilimanjaro, the object, the thing that's in the way, the obstacle. And the answer, you'll have to read the book for the actual process, but if you had to eat an elephant, as they say, you eat it small bite at a time. It's the same thing for just about every obstacle that you head towards. So, the biggest thing that I could say as a takeaway is write down your 10 biggest obstacles, what you think they are. Actually sit down and create an obstacles list. And then see what it is about each one that is getting in your way. Really be honest with yourself, and then take a look at the book, and it'll walk you through how to get through it.
Yeah, I do remember listening to the audiobook of this book, but I think I must have been distracted at the time because I can't remember too much about it. But yeah, it's definitely one to re-listen to and probably actually sit down and read properly. It's very easy, well, at least in my mind, it's very easy to skim read books and not take them in properly. Anyway, should we go on to the next book?
Absolutely.
Right. The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, which are the same authors as the first book. So,
yeah.
Why did you pick this one?
Right. I love this author, as you can tell. And I like what he has to say. Dan Sullivan is a really good at taking things that are quite obvious and making them and distilling them down into actually creating things that we say we're going to do, but we're not actually doing. And so the reason I love this book so much is because I think we all need to make it a part of our vocabulary. We tend to go towards our saboteur side, our negative thinking, or the challenges, or, like I said, the obstacle that's in the way. So how are we going to get into the gap versus the gain? Getting the gain versus the gap, opposite. The gain is a reframe. How do we reframe how we're looking at things? So, if we tend to say, oh, that can't be done, or I can't buy that, or I can't afford that, versus the gain, that's the gap perspective. The gain is taking a look at it in a different reframe of I can't afford that right now, but we'll work towards that and enjoy it once I have that. So there's a different way. I oversimplified it, but there are ways that we can teach others, especially in teamwork and setting up systems so that we're all living in the gain together. It's not just about us and the voice in our head. It's also about how we communicate and the patterns that we communicate with. And if we're always saying, oh, that can't be done, oh, we can't do that, oh, we've tried that already, then it's not helping anybody. So how do we use the gain and create more of what we could have? You'll have to read the book. It's, again, the audio, I think, is even better, where he's interviewed and he talks about how he created, a very healthy company living in the game.
Yeah. Okay. So I've noticed a slight trend in most of your books. I think all of your books actually are non-fiction, well, not necessarily self-help, but business related. Is that the main area that you read books, or do you read across all sorts of genres and things, or are you primarily in books that are helpful in nature? Is that your reading fetish, so to speak?
Yeah, I read a lot of business books that are focused in leadership, self-help, business structure, business process, creativity, and innovation. So those tend to be my my genres, and especially because I'm writing my third book right now, and so a lot of the books that I have read for my first two and leading up to this third one really surround a lot of the research that I do. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to the next choice then, which is Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine. Probably mispronounced the poor guy's name. So why this book?
This is a great book about saboteurs. He has a really great program that I went through as well, and certified through the program. The program talks about how to use your PQ, your positive intelligence.
Yeah.
We all have saboteurs. He outlines 6 different saboteurs, and then actually he has you take a test and a quiz. You can do it in the book as well, and it'll outline what your top saboteurs are and how to work through them. I do a lot of coaching, and so I use saboteurs in the coaching that I do. And the saboteurs always come up almost with every single person. We all have them. How do we deal with them? How do we move past them? And then how do we use positive intelligence to get to peak performance? Peak performance is what he describes as measuring the positive intelligence score. So there's a scoring system in the book, and he shows how to achieve the highest score for positive intelligence. And you can actually see over the course of 21 days going through his program and through the book how this increases by practicing this for about 15 to 20 minutes a day. So it's pretty actionable and really neat. It's backed by Stanford research. He's a Stanford professor and has done a lot of research in this area. So it's a really great New York Times bestselling book.
Okay. And can you tell us what your saboteurs were or are? Like what kind of things are examples of saboteurs?
Oh, yeah. So like the saboteurs are the judge, the controller, the victim, the avoider, the pleaser. Yeah. Those are the saboteurs that he uses. And there's a set of questions and answers that helps to identify where you live the most. We all have all of them, but where do we lean to the most? Yeah. And that's what and really then how do we develop a PQ muscle is what he's talking about. Yeah. So when the saboteur shows up, how do we tell the saboteur to take a seat? And I do this a lot as well in coaching, which is you can't really tell a saboteur to you can't yell at the saboteur, it just gets louder. But what you can tell a saboteur to take a seat, and then you can call on a different area, a different muscle of the brain and in ourselves to be able to show up with more performance and work better around difficult people, improving work-life balance, reducing stress, in our sales, in our operations, and just about everything that we do every day. Okay.
All right. Let's go on to the next book, which is a familiar one to watch. Which is How to Win Friends and Influence People. I think this has been mentioned more than any other book on this show.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And I'm also curious to see what others have said about this book. It's just a timeless classic.
Yeah.
And it's one of those books that I think I keep close by and remind myself of all the just like I said, the timeless areas of what it means. As you know, I wrote a book around called Human to Human.
Yeah.
And so this really runs parallel to the book that I wrote. Almost they're almost cousins, if not sister or brothers in common. And so so the thing about this is, how do we interact with others every day and create more resonance and more connection, especially right now. It's still relevant when you look at technology and AI and virtual reality and all the tech, automation and all that stuff. So how do we win friends? How do we connect? How do we become more human to human in a technological age? And a lot of the stuff in this book still applies, and I think could be leveraged today, even though it was written a number of years ago.
Yeah, I think it's 1930s or 20s or something like that.
That sounds about right.
I did re-listen to it because it's been so popular on the show, and it's still it's one of those books where a lot of it you would think would be common sense, but actually isn't common sense. People just don't know. So
yeah,
it was a good starting book for people. Okay, let's go on to the next book. Orbiting the Giant Hairball by Gordon McKenzie. So why do you pick this one?
All right. So I found this book actually on the bookshelf on my wife's bookshelf back when she was we were first dating. So this would have been 23 years ago, 24 years ago, maybe. And she had met him and she showed me shared with me both the book and the story. The book is phenomenal if you want to tap into your creativity. He was the chief creative officer for Hallmark. In the days when Hallmark was first getting started, and he created a culture that helped to create one of the most creative companies in the world. I mean, what better creativity can you come up with than cards that express your feelings and the artwork that goes alongside that? I mean, it's just phenomenal. But the way that he shows up in the book is so interesting, because he talks about how he does these obscure things inside the company, like shows up and helps a sales team to find their innovation through meditation. And he lights a candle and he has them close their eyes and he has them meditate and figure out, what is the what is possible. Again, he lives in the gain, so he's trying to get them out of the gap into the gain. You're seeing the theme here. And so there's a lot of different creative stories of how he got Hallmark to where it was, but he did it in a very unique, creative way, almost like a mad scientist, if you will. And he did these neat little things. He's now passed on, but my wife saw him speak, and what he would do is he would actually he would put flags up and then tie it on a string and run it from one side of the room to the other. And the audience could pick one of the flags, and that became his topic of what he would talk about. Oh. And so he was always unique in the way that he saw things, and the way he presented, and the way he showed up. And I think that that's representative in the book.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm tempted. I've got an experimental change thing that I was working on. We could try out for the book transition. Let's try this. This is my new one, but I don't think I don't think I'm going to do it for all of them. So this is the new book choice transition.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Oh, I better turn it off. Yeah. So here we go. Right. And the next book is Co-Active Coaching by Kimsey-House, Karen Kimsey-House, and there's about 15 authors for this book. I've never seen a book with more authors, so apologies to all the other people I cut off. So why did you choose this book?
Did you say what did you say, that there's offers, or 15 what?
There's quite a lot of authors, people who wrote the book, who are credited for this particular book.
Authors, got it. So Karen and Henry are the originators, and everyone else became a co-author, partner, or somebody that they included along the way as they iterated the books. They started the company Coactive, which used to be Coaches Training Institute, the largest coaches in-person company in the world. And over 30 years ago, my wife and I became good friends with them. And we really believe in what they're doing. My wife, Courtney, was the head of global marketing for their company. The book itself, and I went through their program, is incredible. It really talks about how to show up, how to process, and how to be with another human being as any kind of coach. It's I mean, except for sports, that we're not talking about a sports coach, but as a coach that somebody would like to hire and help them through. And their whole thing is coactive. So as it says in the title and what you'll see in the book, it's how do we show up together? It's me standing alongside you and creating a coactive, a coexistence about how do we create what it is that you need in order to get out of this. So it's not me up above you, not me below you, not me behind, not me in front, but me co-leading, co-being. And they talk through all kinds of tools and examples and ways of actually coaching through with that methodology.
Yeah. Okay. So all the authors I was writing about, all the people who followed along, so they were the people to omit from the page, and that was a good thing. Okay.
Yeah, you found the right two.
Yeah. Right. I'm going to go back to the traditional. And the next one, this is another book that has been recommended in the last 3 or 4 shows by every single person. So why is this book so special? That's what I want to ask.
Yeah. The book itself is, if you can't tell, I like things that are simple. I like simple concepts. I think we gravitate towards complex concepts, and then we never obtain them. So that's one of the things I like about this book. I did hear both of his sons in person and met them, and it just completely rearranged my brain for the moment when I heard them talk. And I love the fact that they talk about these 4 agreements, that if we live by them, if we truly live by these agreements, it's going to, shift our own personal existence. You may have heard it before, but, the 4 are being impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, which we all know can happen to all of us, and always do your best. So those 4, I mean, if you just live by those 4, almost like golden rules, I can't think of a better way to live life.
Yeah. So this book sounds like it was equally as impactful for you as for everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I did it as part of a book club with, I think, about 20 other people. And we had just such an incredible time talking through the book, which, brought up dialogue and conversations around each of these and how that shows up in our life. I think it's a neat way to do it.
Yeah, I'm just basically waiting for my next Audible credit to come up so I can listen to this in audiobook.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
God bless the Audible credits.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm very much an Audible listening person, but I've got listened to so many good books from this show, and I've got a big backlog now. So I'm going to have to organise everything into lists of blog posts or recommendations, because even though this is on Amazon, obviously, and on certain other video platforms, I'm not sure I'm allowed to name on Amazon, but it needs to be collated, all my choices, and that's one that's come up so many times that I've just got to read it. Anyway, on to the next book, which is Essentialism by Greg McKeown.
Yeah, great book. It's in the again, simple concept, right?
Yeah.
However, I took it to the nth degree after reading the book and a bunch of other things that I read and did. I got rid of about 50% of everything that I owned, including my car.
Yeah.
I got rid of, I haven't had a car now for 7 years. I thought that after 2 weeks I might need one, but it's been 7 years and I just haven't had one. I got rid of 50% of everything else that I own, whether it's clothes, technology. It's time for me to actually start doing that again, to take a look at everything that I have. But at the same time, it's also helped to relieve and almost create like this feeling, of just living less allows us to live more, as the best way I can say it. It gives us more space to create, and I've noticed a massive difference in just seeing opportunities and then also just de-stressing. We live in so much stress, and by having more stuff around, it doesn't help. It weighs us down. And so, I highly recommend the book. He talks through how to be an essentialist and what to do that holds us up from letting go.
Yeah, I'm surprised, that nobody else has recommended this before. And I'm also surprised, I'm pretty sure I've not read this or listened to this before. It's one that I've been recommended several times, but maybe the credit after the 4 agreements, I'll go for this one. So, all right. Built to Last by Jim Collins. So why did you choose this particular book?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is still relevant today. What makes a company last? What takes a company down, and what makes a company last? The Jim Collins wrote this book out of a Stanford research project for his the project that he did with Jerry Porras in for the School of Business at Stanford, and he talks about different brands like 3M and Walmart, HP, Walt Disney, Philip Morris, GE, and why are they still all companies that are around? What is it that makes them tick, that allows them to be sustainable as a brand, as a business? And when you look at things like other companies that never made it, you look at Zenith what happened to that brand, or Motorola, who was originally a battery repair business and eventually became circuits and cellular communications. They were able to pivot from one thing to another because they saw an opportunity in order to make that company last longer than what it originally was built to do. So how do you create a shift in your company when it's needed? And it will be needed. I mean, I don't know a company out there that hasn't seen a downfall or a window of time where they needed to take a look at something. I mean, you look at Microsoft and or even Apple. I mean, both companies have gone through massive change. They've been on their highest of highs and been at the lowest of lows. And the thing that changed them in both scenarios was leadership. For those two, they changed leadership. The right leadership got put in place, and those two companies were able to last. So, it's a great this is a great book. I could talk about it forever. It's got more case studies than you can ever want, sharing how they did it, what they did to get to be a company that lasts.
Okay, all right. Let's go on to the next. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. I hope I got his name right. So,
Sapiens is a great book. It's a book that I highly recommend because they don't just talk about the history of humanity, like where did it come from, between the historical and the biological side, but how does it equate to where we are today? And what can we use based upon that knowledge to where we're going? There's obviously a natural selection in life and things that don't last. As we know, dinosaurs did not last. However, when we take a look at some of the things, the narratives, the connected past developments, any of the events that happened, and then we compare them to the larger contextual ideas, like like how was life governed? How do things exist like plants? And what is it around our biology that created more of what we needed for things to change? I mean, our physicality, our mentality. And so if we start to take a look at all of these things and start to see, some similarities in how we evolved, then they discuss exactly how to predict where we're going to be going. And that to me is like priceless. It's really neat to see like actual scientific, predictions over what we already know.
Okay. I mean, I know obviously you've written a book called Human to Human, so you've got a little bit of an affiliation with Sapiens and humans and all right. So not surprised to see that book here. Okay. On to the next one. Almost put one book there. Everybody Writes by Anne Handley, who of course is a famous speaker.
I think everybody should know Anne. If not, you should run out and know her or get to know her. She's a great lady, friend of mine, and wonderful writer. Obviously, because she's written the book on writing. And this book's great. It's her second edition. She completely revised the book from the first book. And it gives you a framework for writing. I don't think that people are born great writers. I think that we evolve as writers. And so she writes about that. She writes about where we're at right now and how do we write for the best framework that's going to work for each of us, because we each are creative in our own ways. And so what is the different way that we can each take that framework and apply it to how it's going to work for us? And she just does it so masterfully. She's also got a ton of wonderful humor that she throws into how she writes, which makes it a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I've seen Anne speak probably about 5 or 6 times, I think, various conferences. And she's always a fantastic speaker. I'm not actually, again, this is probably on my long list of books to read. So apologies, Anne, for not getting around to reading your book yet, but I'll get there eventually. The trouble with running a show where I go through people's book recommendations is I end up with too many books to have to read. But hey ho, that's not a bad problem, I suspect. Right. And the next book is Human to Human, H2H by this Bryan Kramer person. So,
who would I be if I didn't put my own books in there, right?
Yeah, you can put your own books in. Yeah.
So H2H is about bringing back the simplicity, empathy, and imperfection of life. In the things that we all know and love. We've talked about actually a lot of the things that are important throughout a lot of the books that we just discussed. I just attempted to boil it down into a book. The book's not long. You can read it in one sitting. It's less than 100 pages. And I did that because how could you write a book about simplicity and write a 500-page book? And so it's a really, really focused book. And it's still, I think, become just as relevant today as it was the day that I wrote it 6 years ago, and it's really breaking down the barriers of what it means to be human in today's world.
Okay, and what was the thing that prompted you to write the book in the first place?
I was already writing my second book, Shareology, as my first book. This book was a surprise baby. And so I was talking about this concept a lot. It just didn't dawn on me to write a book about it. And so I was giving a keynote about it one day. It was my umpteenth time giving the keynote, and not knowing that it was going to resonate so loudly because social media was just first arriving on the scene. And when social media hit, it was the first time that companies had they lost the ability to just talk one way. So it was no longer news, radio, TV, and newspapers. So now all of a sudden we had social media where anybody could tweet about the brand and the brand couldn't do anything about it other than reply. And so now I think it became a challenge, and still is a challenge today. That's where the book came from, is that keynote actually went viral. It got over 24 million impressions in like the next 48 hours. And so I sat down and wrote a book in the next week using a lot of the writing I'd already done and pulled it together. And it became an instant bestseller because of the relevance, I think, of both the timing and what I've done, what I had done to that date. So yeah, that's where the book came from.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting story. Right, we've got a choice now. We'll give you a choice. We can go on to your other book, or we can go into somebody else's book next.
Yeah, let's go into the next book, not my book.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave that. We'll leave the book that everybody knows the title of now because you just mentioned it. We'll leave that to the end, and we'll go on to the next book, which is Lifescale by Brian Solis. So, why this book?
It seems like I'm picking a lot of my friends. Brian's a good friend and a wonderful human. He is now the chief evangelist, I think, for innovation at Salesforce. At the time when he wrote this, he was an analyst at another analyst company. It was neat to see what he'd done with this book, because a lot of his work had previously been done with predictions and analyzing technology and where we're at, where we're going, really looking at a lot of trends. And in this book, he went and he took kind of a 90, if not even 180 degree turn from everything else that he'd done, and returned back to reclaiming lives, reclaiming our life, and really taking control of what that means. And so, as he had written a lot about technology takes over our life, still does today, even more so. And what does that mean to each of us? How do we actually center ourselves? He talks about and walks through what distracts us, what gains our attention, what techniques are manipulative and digital, how to find meaning and purpose. visualizing future, with and without technology, all the things that we really stopped doing for ourselves when technology arrived on the scene, and now how to take that back and reclaim it.
Yeah. Again, he's somebody I've seen speak a couple of times.
Oh,
Always
cool.
been very impressed. But he's always been somebody I've seen speak at big venues. So it's not. I don't think I've ever actually. I think I might have said good speech to him afterwards, but that's about my limit of my interaction. So anyway, shall we go on to the next book, which isn't yet your book? We've still got another book to go.
Oh, that's all right. We don't have to get to my book.
We do have to we have to, for completeness. Anyway, let's go on. The Stake by Henry Kimsey-House and David Skibbins. So this is the same author as co-active coaching, isn't it? So
yeah, Henry's the same author. The Stake is really neat. Building a stake, creating a stake, S-T-A-K-E. As you know, I always, every time I say the steak, it makes me hungry. But there's a really interesting thing around the stake, because we need to, and we like to create things that are more difficult in our minds than they need to be. Number two is it's hard to align with what we know as the intention for the outcome. What is the outcome of something that we really desire? And so what the stake does is it gives us an emotion to assign to the outcome that we desire, so that we all know where we're heading. If I say that, like when when Courtney and I were moving, we created a stake together, and that stake was, because it had a deadline. All stakes have a deadline or a timeline, and that stake was for the sake of simplicity and ease. And every time we had a hard decision to make, we would come back to that stake. Is this simple? Is it easy? And that made it less fights, less arguments, and much easier move, which can be almost a divorce. Most moves are not real easy. So, that's what we chose as our stake. It ended up being a great stake for us to live by. You can use the stake and the process that he designs and outlines as or both of them as a way of aligning with your team, so that you're all pointed in the right direction. And as they make decisions, they know how to make the decision against the stake and don't have to check back in quite as much. And we all know exactly where we're pointed and going. So I think it's a great model.
Yeah, I think systems of any kind, but especially something like this, work really well. Okay, it's time for you to talk about your difficult second album. Shareology by Bryan Kramer. So this is your second book. I think you're writing your third book, but talk a little bit about this book and how it came about.
Shareology is how sharing powers the human economy. Yeah. Like I said, it was supposed to be my first book. It ended up being a much more in-depth, research-driven book, over 150 different interviews from all walks of life. And it boiled down basically what, where, why, when, and how people and brands share. Yeah. And talks through an actual equation of how to share in alignment with the outcome you desire. And I talk about then how to create, build, and share in that equation. The most important thing here is that I'm talking about sharing not just on social; it's in life. So yes, I cover a lot of social, but it's also how do we share things? We share Uber, we share our cars, we share in conversation, and then we also share online. So what is the human algorithm for sharing? And the thing about sharing that's most fascinating to me is that it is how we connect. It is the only way that we connect. And the one thing that humans have the biggest desire for, the one thing we all have in common, is connection. So it is the reason for why we share, because we all want that one thing. And so the book actually talks through how to create more connection, how to create more truth to trust faster.
So when you were researching this book with all these interviews, was there any lesson you learned from those interviews that surprised you in terms of sharing?
Yeah, we are what we share.
Okay.
Yeah, we are what we share. So if you were to go out and you were to share about spreadsheets for the next 10 days, I would start to think that you really are interested and even might become an expert around spreadsheets. If you started to share then about a certain dog species, I might think that you are not only just an animal lover, but depending upon how much and how specific you get, I might even think of you as an expert at that dog species. So we become actually what we share. The problem is that we share sometimes we aren't as focused around what we share, and so it creates dissidence or distance between what we think we know you're about or what you're an expert at versus what you actually are an expert at. And so how do we get more aligned so that our audience actually knows how we can work together and know what you do and what you're an expert at, and what sharing can help with. And then that also applies to people, process, and things. I mean, it's not just about us as people, but it's also brands. And I outlined how an ice cream company actually aligned community around sharing. They did a local campaign and they shared the photos that were generated locally within a city, and they shared the generated content back up on billboards, and it created more connection and more community. So there's a lot to sharing that came out of the book, but the biggest thing to answer your question is we are what we share. Okay,
that's interesting. And also, I've got a terrible habit of just sharing stuff all over the shop. So I think I'm probably somebody who should read this book a bit more. Well, I should read this book. I haven't read your book, unfortunately. Anyway, let me ask you a little bit of a controversial question. Well, it's not a controversial question. Out of all of these books that you've recommended, if you had to give one of these books to anybody, could you say which one you would give, or at least could you give me an indication of your logic for how you would work out which one of these books to give somebody? So
it's hard to say because each person has their own. Like if I think of a different person, I think that they each would need a book, a different book, based upon who they are and what they're going through. But I think across the board, I'd have to go with The Gap and the Gain. I think most humans tend to live in the gap instead of the gain. And it really applies more across the board to almost everybody. So if I had to pick a generalist book, then that would be the one. But everything else, I would say, or not everything else, but most others are a little more specific to what it is that they need at the time and what I would recommend. I think The Gap and the Gain would probably be the biggest generalist book that I would give, and I have given it as gifts to people. I think it's a great book to give.
Okay. And you've mentioned that you're working on a third book. So could you tell us a little bit about what that book's going to be about?
I can only give you just a little bit because I haven't shared a lot publicly yet. But what I can tell you is that it's a sequel to H, Human to Human.
Oh, okay.
And it will be focused entirely on trust, the lack of trust that we have gained over time. The lowest level of trust that we have right now ever, and what it's going to take to gain trust back, elevate trust, and connect trust at a deeper level.
So you weren't tempted to write AI to AI then?
So say that again.
AI to AI, artificial intelligence to artificial intelligence is it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for the people who have been watching on Amazon, and stick around, Bryan, for maybe bonus content elsewhere that I'm not allowed to say on Amazon. But thanks for everybody watching on Amazon, and I'm going to end that stream now. And it takes so long to finish. So now we're on the recorded YouTube bit, so I can edit this bit out. So if we make screw up, it doesn't matter anymore. Let's talk a bit about Bryan Kramer and all the things you do. Because this is on YouTube, we're now out of Amazon's restrictions on what we can talk about. So who is Bryan Kramer, and what kind of services do you provide for people? And what would you say is your aim in the world? Like, if like, well, I'm getting a bit deep here actually, but 30 years time, well, actually, let's say 100 years time. Let's be optimistic. 100 years time, what would you want people to? What would be your Wikipedia entry? What were you looking to achieve in your life?
Number one, that my kids knew and love me for and remember me as somebody who cared deeply about them and their soon to be, or not soon to be, at some point children. Let's say that. So if I had to go 100 years, and maybe that's even further, their grandchildren. Number two is, and the second thing is that I think what I really try to put out into the world and am really passionate about is that being human is everyone's competitive advantage. If everybody just took that one thing away, I'd be happy, because I think that it's just going to get worse. I think that that the technology and the things that start to separate us and pull us apart is technology, if we use it for what what it's growing to be, especially like some of the recent AI stuff. And so how do we create more human relevant moments and human moments, just moments of truth that, we're all, that helps create a deeper connection. I see technology as a thing that that's driving us apart in some ways. I'm not saying that technology is all bad. It should just be used to bring us together, not apart. And so that's my biggest thing. What I do in the world, you asked, is as an executive coach, I work with people to grow their businesses. I grew 3 different companies and successfully, and then was a keynote speaker for several years. Still am, just not as I don't travel as much. I used to travel 200 days a year, and I love to both speak and I love to coach others, specifically around how to grow their company and not burn out. I believe that we can all live a really great life doing whatever it is that we dream, and at the same time not have to work the hustle culture. So that's really where I'm focused, is in that. I work with companies that are mostly 1 million and above, although sometimes I'll take some companies that I believe in, or people, and work with them. I don't do this any longer for what's going to make the most, although I care about fiscal, but I care more about joy in the world. And so if it feels, in my heart, like it's something that I want to do, that's where I'm pointed. So, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think I've got an idea. Well, I know enough about what you mean by human to human as opposed to not. But there will be people I know who, well, maybe they've got this far through the interview, who may be thinking, well, what does it, surely we're all human anyway. What does it mean by being human? I mean, what would be an example of something that a company or a brand or a person does that you would like, that's not acting like a human? That kind of shows that they really don't care.
Yeah. So there's 3 elements that goes into the answer to that question. The first one is the one that we talked about before, which is simplicity.
Yeah.
As humans, we tend to make things too complex and overinflate them. We use acronyms. We confuse people with our own language, and we confuse ourselves with what we think needs to be done versus just knowing, okay, the next best thing. How about I'll ask you a question real quick and that'll help. What brand do you believe embraces simplicity?
Ooh. I'm tempted to say Apple off the top of my head, even though in some ways they're not really. But yeah, I mean, something like Apple as opposed to some of the other brands.
Yeah, so it's a great brand. I mean, you can count on how many fingers, all their products, you know where to buy it and you know where to get support. Talk about simplicity. It's incredible. I think, you know, brands that really make it easy to buy and get support, those are the brands that we all gravitate towards. You know, obviously the product needs to work, but the simplicity of what we're using and how we're using it is just spectacular. How about the next one is empathy. We have a lack of empathy in going on right now. And when we see more empathy, especially coming from a brand, it makes a huge difference. And we want to gravitate towards that brand. And when we see a lack of empathy, we run. You know, I think we can see that with, you know, like, I don't know, Twitter, and you see it in other areas too. And so, you know, what brand do you think embraces empathy?
Well, it's like there's lots of examples of places that, I mean, generally speaking, it's the more kind of home, smaller businesses that tend, because they have to. It's where people are in departments. I think it's like airlines are become the worst examples of a lack of empathy. I would say like smaller restaurants and things. That's where you meet the person and you talk to them, and it's kind of you have a relate and you feel like you know them.
Yeah,
it's more empathetic situation. I'm not sure about any big companies. I think a lot of big companies will fake it. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. You know, I love that because I've not heard restaurants as an answer before.
Yeah.
That's the first time local restaurants. I think that's a great idea, a great response. You know, a large brand that yes might be, you could call it faking it, but it's felt by the customer.
Yeah.
It might be Amazon, and the only reason I say that is because when you go to return things, it's really easy to get them returned. It goes fast. They don't ask you questions, and they don't give you a hard time. You know, there's other brands where you might go to return something and you might even pay a fee to return it, or you might have to drive across town to return it. They just make it very difficult. And so there's a lot of empathy in how they treat that. The last one is imperfection. We tend to try as brands and as people be perfect, and it plays against us. Who do you think as a brand embraces imperfection?
Ooh, I wasn't expecting to have to answer questions late at night here. I'm trying to think of. I can't. Well, it's like there were lots of brands. I think you're right in terms of there aren't many brands that are going for the perfectionism route now. But I'm struggling to think of somebody who represents imperfection, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a hard one. So one of the things that you could look at is like Dove, the soap brand. They celebrate the imperfection of skin.
Yeah.
And the way that they come across in marketing is great. Did you come up with one?
No. It's funny because I was thinking Dove. Not really a brand I necessarily associate with. So I was like, how do you go that as an example? Yeah, but they've done a lot of advertising and stuff about imperfections and the like, haven't they?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't. It's like, it'd be one of those 10 minutes time. I'll be like, whenever the interview finished, I'll be like, oh yeah, I just thought of this one.
Right. Yeah.
I'll have to have you back on again so I could say like a year's time. I've
Yeah.
got an example now.
Yeah. So when you match simplicity, empathy, and imperfection together in one brand, you have the most human company. And those are the brands that are built to last. Those are the brands that we want to stick by no matter what. We become raving fans. We want to create more trust with them. We want to be a part of them. And it really is, even when they make a mistake, they own it and they let us know that they have made that mistake and we still stand by them. So those are the ingredients to a human brand, because when you think about it, those are the ingredients to what makes us humans human. So if we apply the same things that make us human to the brand, we're gonna be more likely to stay with them and be with them. And so apply that to every area in your marketing, your support, your sales, everything that you do. And that's what the ingredients should be that will help you create more of what you want.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it, I mean, this shows something about my character and how my mind works. I can't think of an example, but I'm thinking, well, I think a lot of it depends on organizational structure, because you give the example of Amazon. Those return people, one of the things they are almost allowed to do instantly is give people a refund. It's almost like that's, but you can imagine another company somewhere where if they think their boss is not going to like them giving a refund, it's much more. So a lot of it is related to the structure of the company. That's why.
Oh yeah,
big time. Of the time it's easier on a smaller company, and you see this as companies grow. Because I used to work for a very small company with 25 people in it for about three years, a small software company, and then I moved to a bigger company, and that was taken over by another company, until it ended up like FTSE 100 company. And you see how the companies often lose their soul as they grow, because they feel they have to have procedures for everything, and that takes autonomy away from employees. So yes, I think about stuff like that, but I can't think of an example for anything.
That's all right. That's right. I love how imperfect you're being right now.
Yeah. Well,
this is
but that's the thing. I mean, I've got this idea of writing a book called "Everybody Else Is Useless Too," about that very thing, that we all think everybody else is perfect and wonderful, when actually it's a better model to start to think that everybody's useless and has maybe one or two little attributes that they're brilliant at. Rather than this idea that there's this super race of people who are brilliant, and you feel like an imposter, but it's like, well, no, everybody's really kind of useless to some extent. So anyway, it's been great to have you on the show, Bryan. How can people find out about you or get in touch with you, or like find out when your next book is available? What are the ways that people can find more Bryan Kramer?
I think the best way is probably to go to my website at bryankramer.com, which is Bryan with a Y and Kramer with a K. And all my books and social media and newsletter and podcast and all that kind of stuff is there. Although my podcast is a little bit on hiatus while I'm writing my third book, but all the archives are there. I do send a newsletter once every 2 weeks, and it's very carefully handwritten, and every time you reply, I will reply back human to human. So that's one of the things that I love. It's just about one thing. I only write about one thing every 2 weeks, and it's usually what's on my mind about one of the topics that we've just talked about, and so or other things in that genre. And so you got a taste of what I might dive into, but at a little bit of a deeper level. Okay, well, thanks so much for being on the show, and thanks to the people watching the YouTube version of this show. And I've got no end titles for this show, actually. I've got end titles for every other show I've ever done, but not for this one. So thanks, everybody. I'm just going to